students, welcome to the 52nd session of Legal Empowerment Through Interaction lecture series. We have conducted 51 lectures. Today on the 52nd day, we have an eminent personality on a very, very relevant subject of today, data protections and the issues related to that, including that of privacy. We have Justice B. N. Srikrishna, sir. Welcome, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Nice to see that many lawyers are being empowered every day in the afternoon during this period of a pandemic when most of us are actually in solitary confinement and disempowered. At least technology has come to our service and helped us in improving our minds during this enforced idleness. All right. Thank you. Now, let's start from the beginning. What exactly is data? We talk of data protection. Data is the oil of this century, in this millennium, blah, 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 all kinds of things are said. Now, data is something that is relatable to a human being and indicates a human being. For example, it could be somebody's name, address, telephone number, personal description, photograph, and so on. Now, why is it necessary to talk in terms of protection of data? What is so great about data? For the simple reason that although we might not realize it, the data of every human being is being monetized every day without the knowledge or consent of that particular person. Now, I always say this. When I was a small kid, the Bombay Municipal Corporation permitted cows to be maintained within the city limits. So sitting in the gallery of our first floor house, I would watch the cows being taken in herds on the street. And you know, the cows, when they're going, they drop dung. The one chap would run behind it, pick up the dung and put it and collect it very safely. So I was curious and I asked my father and said, why is he doing this? This is useless. Why is he? My father told me, son, you have no idea. That is very precious. Now, of course, now today they say it's very precious because Patanjali will probably manufacture some antidote for pandemic COVID-19 out of that. Even in good old days, it was considered useful material and it had a monetary value. But today, data has a monetary value because that gives particularly in the age of e-commerce, a lot of information of the market, development of the market, how to reach customers, how to assess their habits, consumer habits, and so on. That is why it has a lot of value. Of course, in terms of only the e-commerce, it has greater value when you go into science, you go into the area of defense and so on. But the bottom line is, it has value and people have realized its value. It has also value because it enables us to, with the help of analytics, to come out with certain solutions which are very, very important to the society in general and to particulars if necessary. Now in this country, there was always a debate about whether data was, privacy of data was to be protected or not. There had been a series of matters which reached the Supreme Court finally. And the Supreme Court, different conflicting views in different judgments. Some took the view that personal data was a fundamental right. Some took the view and said it was not a fundamental right. And in this state of affairs, what happened is nobody really bothered in those days. The issue became very important when the government of India suddenly introduced this Aadhaar as a indicator of the human beings in the country. Now, such numbers or indicators have been there all over the world in different forms. But some of the activists, social activists, some of you also may be involved in that, challenged Aadhaar on several grounds. And one of the grounds was that it was an infringement of the fundamental right of privacy. Now, the matter was being debated in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court raised this question and said, what makes you say that it is a fundamental right? Then, of course, as usual, the counsel on one side showed 3 judgments, counsel on the other showed 3 judgments, each conflicting with the other, and Supreme Court was puzzled, and therefore they had a big, larger bench to solve the issue. I think 7 or 9 judges sat together, and keeping the Aadhaar issue for the time being on the boiler, they went into this question whether privacy of data was a fundamental right. Finally, the Supreme Court, after a long debate, gave an answer in a long judgment and said that yes, it is a fundamental right, but where is it enumerated in in part 3 of the Constitution? They said, no, it is referable to Article 21. It is very much intimately connected with the right to life, and therefore it is Article 21 is the Supreme Court, like a magician, can always pull out a rabbit out of a hat. Whatever is not there, they pull it out of Article 21 and say, hey, it is where it is to be founded. Finally, they said it's founded in Article 21. Then the next question is, Supreme Court did a very, very, very important thing. They said that this is a right, but then the debate was, then the matter went back to the Aadhaar court, and Aadhaar court finally gave a long judgment and upheld Aadhaar, but said that just as Aadhaar is your right of privacy, the right of the citizens, similarly, we must accord to the state a certain contingency where the state is enabled to access these particular data without the consent or even approval of the person whose data it is. Now, they laid a threefold test. I'll come back to that test in a little while, and said that if the state is empowered by a proper legislation which passes through these constitutional parameters, then the state has a right to access your data without consent, etc. Now, this is so far as Aadhaar is concerned. When this debate was going on furiously in the Supreme Court raised the question and said, hey, but where is the law in this country on personal data protection? So everybody started, as usual, counsel start looking at their juniors look at their instructing solicitors look at the secretary of the department, nobody knows where the law is. Finally, they had to consent there was no law. This was on a Thursday afternoon, and I was about to leave for New York on the same day, midnight flight. So I got an SOS call from the minister saying that, sir, this is what has happened. By Monday morning, I have to tell the Supreme Court where the law is. I don't have a law. So what we propose is we'll propose a committee to go into this question, recommend a law, and you be the chairman. I said, hey, can I do it after I come back? He said, no, I have to give an answer to the Supreme Court on Monday morning. So I said, yes, and went away. So on next day, I'm told that on Monday morning or Tuesday morning when the Supreme Court hearing resumed, they said with a bland face, told the Supreme Court that, yes, sir, we have already appointed a committee headed by Honorable so-and-so who will go into this question. Supreme Court said, very good, let's go on with the matter. And they have referred to it also somewhere in a long paragraph. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is, it has now been established that there is a right to privacy, undeniably, and that right to privacy is a fundamental right. Now, let us examine some of the concepts which go around this concept of right to privacy and data and protection and all. Like any right, the right to privacy needs a protection. Before that, what is it that is the bottom line in this? Data is, as I said, something that belongs, when I say belong, there is a real jurisprudential difference here, which I will just now talk about. That is mine, and which I can part with for the purpose of processing further. Now the question is, when I said this is my data, is it a situation of a proprietary right that I'm establishing? Now please notice that as far as property is concerned, in this country, you have either the properties which are protected, immovable properties are protected by a separate legislation. Then it is movable property, it is dealt with by separate legislation, and so on. So the question is, let's take for example my name. If my name is my data, and if I claim that it is my property. Now look what kind of consequences follow. Can I rent it out to somebody and say for 6 months I'll rent it to you, give me so much remuneration? Can I gift it to somebody? Can I transfer it to somebody without consideration? Can I create a trust of my name? Can I give it by way of a bailment? Can I just sell it in the market? These are the issues that arise. Therefore, it is not proper jurisprudentially to call the relationship between the individual and his or her data as one of proprietary relationship. Normally, we assume that whenever you use the genitive case like this is mine, you assume fundamentally that there is a proprietary relationship. Not necessarily so. It could be an intimate relationship without indicating proprietary rights. Again, an example. If I say this is my child, or this is my daughter, this is my son, I don't say that I'm the proprietor or the owner of that particular person. No. If I say this is my friend, it only indicates that there is an intimate relationship between the two persons. It's not that I can sell off that person. And selling off the wife happened only during Harishchandra's period for different reasons that we will not go into right now. Now, similarly, data of a person is something with which that person has intimate relationship. So if there is an intimate relationship, can you take it away without his consent? So the bottom line is, his consent is always a prerogative of the person. Without his consent. So the basic requirement in any transfer of data, which goes by the name of processing of data, the minimum desideratum is that the consent of the person must be taken. Now, when you talk of consent, so many issues again arise. All transactions, for example, all of you are experts on computers. You set at the computer and then you want to enter a website. Usually there is a notice which says, you agree, and there will be some 20 pages small font written, and then we have neither the patience nor the inclination to read all that. First of all, I don't understand English language. Therefore, even if I read it, I don't understand what it is. So I simply click and say yes. The last line will be say, if you say click yes on this, you have agreed to all that has gone before. Now, this is reason that they want to make sure that you have consented to your data being taken. My data would be my name, my address, my email address, and then telephone number, various other particulars that are called for. Therefore, everybody accepts that this is a transaction in which two parties enter into a legal relationship, and it is nothing but a contractual relationship. In a contractual relationship, all of you are experts in law. There are certain fundamental requisites that you should have the capacity to consent, that there should be for consideration, Section 3 of the Contract Act and all that. Now, I have forgotten most of it now. I don't think I can remember all that. Now, one of the requisite things, all of you will remember the famous Mohari Bibi's case, decided by
Dharmadas Ghosh. Yes.
But when none of us was born, even I was not born in those days, Mohari Bibi decided a very important issue. It said a minor's consent is totally invalid and an agreement based on minor's consent is completely void. If it is void, no legal relationship can arise out of it. No contract can ever be born. So that is, and of course, consideration and all that is not very relevant for us discussion right now. So the question is, should minors be permitted to enter into such contractual relations with regard to transfer of data or what we call processing of data? Now, one of the issues that I'm telling you from my experience, because these are all issues that were seriously debated in the committee which I headed. One of the issues was, hey, look, we are Mohari Bibi's day in Indian Contract Act was of the 19th century. We are in the 21st century. Things have dramatically changed. Now, even young kids, they know how to operate computers. They access various websites from which good material is accessible. Now, you see that every day I see an advertisement that Byju's some academy or Khan Academy or something. Even very small kids who are about 10, 11, 12 and who can operate very well a computer, access good material from there. There are online tuitions available. So is it fair to shut them out from the benefits available on the internet only on the ground that they are minors was the best question. The answer to this question is not very satisfactorily given in various other jurisdictions which we examined. In fact, we went around, we didn't go around the world, of course, that is the privilege of only very top people. We looked at the law that was there all over the world and then decided that it was, even in India, the age of majority is different for different purposes. For drinking, it is one age, for marrying, it is one age, and for contract, it is one age. We decided it will be safe that we don't want to go to the extent of drinking or marriage, both are disastrous. Let us stick to the contract part of it. The contract part of it says 18 years is majority. So we stuck to it and say 18 years is majority. So any person who is not a major and whose consent has been procured in a relationship of this nature would be, it would result in a void contract. Fine, but then apart from age, there are other considerations. What is the situation if all of you have experience? You enter into a theater, cinema theater, or a shopping mall, and you will find that there is some security camera which keeps on taking your photo. Now, if somebody did it on the street, I could object to it. But here, I did not consent. What is the meaning of this? So the law says, all right, it's presumed that you have consented. Your consent is presumed the moment you step across the portal and the camera is clicked. Understandable. Now, when you're driving on the highway, there will be a speed camera. The speed camera will take your picture. Of course, it is for the purpose of ensuring that you're within the speed limit. Now, is that proper? Is it with my consent? There also one may say, okay, the law requires that if you are traveling on this, you should have this kind of speed and therefore your consent is presumed. Which leads us to one legal principle, that under certain circumstances, depending on the transactional nature, one may presume consent and therefore data may be taken and subjected to processing. Now, this raises another important question. Are there any situations where my data can be taken for processing without my consent, neither given expressly nor by implication? That is a major issue which is going to be controversial, which is really what is really holding up the government from enacting the law, and they are going round and round the whole thing. I'll come to that last. Now, when is this? I'm going to, let me tell you one thing. I'm not going by this section-based thing because I'm neither a lawyer nor do I understand law. These are all sections that it's already in there, available in public domain, you can read. I'm going to the fundamental principles on which the law is based, because it is the principles that you must understand in order to appreciate whether the Sri Krishna committee draft is good, or the JPC committee draft is good, or the parliamentary committee, the bill of 2019 is good or not. What is the basic principle on which the whole world is moving? So I shall address you only on that, because that is more important in any system of law, not only this. We want to be empowered lawyers, not ordinary lawyers, right? Okay. Now, this law, when is it to start application? Now, all of you are aware that Companies Act 2013, I'm giving you example-rich and examples so that you understand the implication of that. When it was brought into force, everybody realized that from between the 1956 Act and the 2013 Act, there was wide divergence. So the executive did not implement all sections of the Companies Act 2013 at one go. They implemented it bit by bit and bit by bit. It was only very recently that the entire act was implemented. Now, those of you who are familiar with the Industry Act will realize certain amendments were made way back in 1982, I think, in basic sections like industry, workmen and all that, which have not been implemented till today for policy reasons. Now, therefore, when does this data protection law apply? We had suggested that, look, it's somewhat difficult. Suddenly, people have to reorient their thinking, rejig their software, and it is going to involve a lot of physical as well as financial liability and a lot of labor. Therefore, let us give a long rope. So we had said that like you have a regulator for every purpose. For example, the Reserve Bank is the regulator of banking transactions and payment corporations, payment systems. Then you have the SEBI, which is the regulator for capital market transactions. You have the Competition Commission, which is the regulator for competition issues. Then you have IRDAI, which is the regulator for the insurance sector, and so on. So we said there should be a regulator for this also, because who is going to monitor all this? Now, why does it require monitor? See, data is transacted every day. Now, take a simple thing. I go and buy a railway ticket or a plane ticket. That man will ask me to fill an application which will contain some 20 questions, which each answer to which is my data. Now, having taken that data, what is he going to do? How is he going to process it? Now, he is going to give me a ticket, plane ticket. So after that, what he is going to do is with the data after my plane ticket is over. Now, after my plane journey is over, I'm going to throw away the ticket. So what does he do with the data? These are all questions which nobody had thought of. It is necessary to think of them and therefore give an answer to it, saying that what happens when all this comes out. Therefore, there should be a regulator who is going to go into this in detail. That is called Data Protection Authority. Now, how the Data Protection Authority has to be established is delineated in the law, which is not very unnecessary time I cannot take on that. Now, the basic job of the Data Protection Authority is to ensure that there is no breach of data. What is breach of data? Breach of data is defined as unauthorized access to data, or what you call data leakage, or corruption of data. So if I give my name as Sri Krishna and somebody writes it as Radha Krishna or Balakrishna or something, that is breach of data. I confuse back to back. Not that the objection can be there. Sometimes it is better to
Shut up.
but that's a different matter.
Shut up.
Some audio problem.
There is one iPhone is creating some issues. So it's okay. I muted that. I'm sorry for the disturbance.
Okay, no problem. So therefore, corruption of data, then non-updation. The updation is an absolute necessity if data has to have any value. So these are the obligations that has to be enforced on somebody. Now, who is the person on whom it's to be enforced? And now let us go back one step behind and see. As I said, the application of the data would be first to set up a data protection authority as regulator. And within 6 months, he will ensure by interaction with stakeholders as to what should be the best practice in each industry. For example, the protection of data in hospital industry, because hospital deals with very sensitive data like somebody's health data. So how do they enter it without the...
That's because we just put it in the public domain that there is such and such. Either we should go for registration that we don't usually do because it's a very close-knit group.
Unless you have their identity, they will not get access.
Yes. I think we should do that henceforth, sir. This is a lesson to us.
It is like having
So sorry. Because
it's like the difference between having a lecture in the High Court premises and having it somewhere in a public maidan. Anybody?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Correct.
Yes.
we are so sorry, sir.
It's all it does that. These things happen.
Hospital data.
I lost track of what I was saying.
Hospital.
Regarding hospital data.
Application of the law. Therefore, the data regulator would interact with all the stakeholders, understand what is the best practice with regard to data, educate them, and after exchange of dialogue to and fro, settle the regulations which will apply to each sector separately. Now, two questions arise. What should we call the person whose data you are taking, and what should we call the person whose data the person who takes the data? Now, all over the world, it is interesting that the person whose data is being taken is called a data subject. When we were discussing in the committee, the last time I was a subject when the Queen of England was the Queen of India also. Why should I call myself a subject? Because I am in a free country. I assume that I am in a free country even today. So why should I call myself a subject? So let us change the nomenclature. So we said the person whose data you are taking should be called data principal, because it is my data that you are taking. And the person who receives it is called a data fiduciary. All of you are aware of what fiduciary relationship is. Data fiduciary is the person who takes data on trust. Why do I say fiduciary? Because when I go and give the data to him, it's for example, I gave you the example of buying an airplane ticket. I give the data to him so that he may process it and enable me to travel on the airline. I do not give it to him for any other purpose. there is important, the consequence is important now. I go to a bank and give him my data for the purpose of enabling the bank to open a bank account so that I can carry on my financial transactions with them. Now, if the bank manager starts using the data to try and understand what kind of sari or what color of sari my wife wants, business to do it. Namaskaram.
Yes, Kurian Jesu sir, namaskaram.
Namaste. So therefore, it is absolutely necessary. The concept is one of purpose limitation. Purpose limitation is the data to be processed cannot be used for any purpose other than the purpose for which.
So we are not going to admit anyone henceforth. I mean, we'll stop at this and we'll control whatever damage is inside.
That is why I remember.
Sam, you can log the meeting.
Log the meeting. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that.
If you take that option, nobody can enter now.
No,
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah.
it is said in Sanskrit, Shreyamsi Bahu Vignani. If you want to try to do a good thing, there are always innumerable difficulties. Whether it is the yajna being performed during the Ramayana time and being interrupted by all the Rakshasas, or the webinar that is being interrupted by all the present Rakshasas.
That's the problem. It is so good. That's the problem.
Yeah, good people are always harassed in this case. All right. So, purpose limitation is one concept, that the processing of the data has to be done only for the purpose for which it is given and not for any other collateral purpose. Then one limitation is time limitation. Now, interesting thing is time limitation comes with a slight proviso. Now, if I go to a bank and I open a bank account, he asks me a whole lot of data, I give it to him, honestly thinking that it's good. After 3 months,
Sir, can you repeat time limitation?
time limitation is the
Yes.
limitation for which the data
Yeah,
can
repeat.
be changed. That's
Again.
why, for example, if I go to a bank and give him the data and I open an account, as long as my account is there, he can have the data with him. But suppose I decide this bank is useless and I close my bank account, should he continue to have my data? What business has he? Therefore, the question is, the purpose is over, the time is also over, and therefore he must delete the data. Therefore, the data principal will have the right to call upon the data fiduciary to say, you shall not use this data for any purpose other than the purpose for which I gave you, nor for a period beyond the period for which I have authorized you to use it. One difficulty arises. If I tell the bank manager that I have closed the account to delete all the data, he will say, sir, but under the Income Tax Act, I have to maintain it for a period of 7 years. Otherwise, how will I deal with my assessments? That's a legitimate answer. Therefore, the proviso there is, if there is no law which requires him to maintain it for any larger period, then he should follow the instructions and delete the data. So this takes us back to the data principal's right of what does the data principal have? The right is consent to give nor not to give the consent. Number 2, purpose limitation, to ensure that the purpose limitation is there. In fact, he has the fundamental right to go to the person fiduciary and say, are you maintaining my data? What is the data that you are maintaining? He has a right to query him on that. They also query him on the question whether the data is updated and not subjected to corruption. Now, otherwise, our friends will find Kurian Jesu's name will contain my data and my name will contain Kurian Jesu's data. That is not acceptable to either one of us. Therefore, you have to ensure that there is no corruption of any kind. Corruption in the sense, this corruption, not the other regular corruption. Then, he also has a right to say that what is known as the data portability concept. That I don't like you. Now I want to take out your data.
No, sir, I like you. I like you, sir. Monkey.
Please
Monkey.
don't.
Hello, monkey.
That was
Who is
one
that?
of those last of those characters, I believe.
In the
No, remote, sir.
okay, remove that. Just like with several viruses, there are viruses here also. You have to remove them. One by one.
We are dealing with data protection, sir. So we'll do that.
Yeah, correct. So,
The cure is yet to be invented.
all right. Therefore, the right to ensure that the data remains secure, to ensure that it remains uncorrupted, that it is fully updated, and finally, it is to be ported if called upon by the data principle. And lastly, deleted if subject to the provisions of the law. These are all the 5 fundamental rights of the data principle. Now, correspondingly, there will be an obligation on the data processor. Data processor has the corresponding 5 obligations and ensure that the data is used only for the purpose for which it is
Not hearing.
given. Sorry?
Yes.
Only for the purpose for which it is given and not for any other purpose. As I was telling you earlier, if I go to a bookshop for buying a book, he cannot then ask me data with regard to what my daughter's favorite color is as far as sari is concerned. It is absolutely irrelevant for his purpose. His purpose is over the moment he sells the book. At the most, he may ask me and say, what is your preference in books? I may say it is mathematics, philosophy, Sanskrit, the German language, or whatever it is, literature. He may utilize that for the purpose of selling me books on the subject at which I am fond of. That is also understandable. But he can't go into this and say that what is your preference in checks? He is now business. That is the purpose of it. Now, with all this, finally, if I don't want to deal with him, I can always tell him that, sorry, I don't want to deal with you. Transfer all this data to somebody else, some other bookshop wala. That right of portability is there. But there is a little difficulty in the portability point from a technical aspect, that every person who processes data will not do it in the same manner. Therefore, the question is, in what manner is it retained by the first processor? If it is compatible with the other processor's platform, then it has to be ported. That is the fundamental business. Then we have concepts like under what circumstances can data be taken away without the consent of the principal. Now, as I told you, there are certain situations where consent can be presumed. Now, assuming it is not a situation of presumption of consent, can there be a situation? Take, for example, statistical research. No statistical research can take place unless large volume of data is analyzed. Take, for example, your COVID, which is about. Now, in order to understand what age group of human beings are susceptible to COVID, what would be the health parameters which would make a human being susceptible to COVID and even cause mortality, or which are the areas like your containment zones and non-containment zones. All this is on the basis of statistical probability. And data is basically necessary for statistical probability reasons. Now, in such a cases, supposing somebody wants to do some research on the impact of COVID-19 in the city of Bombay or in Maharashtra or in India as a whole or in a particular Southeast Asia, he has to collect a lot of data. True. Then he is not concerned whether it is Sri Krishna's data or Miss X's data or Mr. Y's data. He is concerned with number of persons who have been affected, probably their signs and the areas, geographical areas, etc. Therefore, there is this concept known as anonymization, that you may use data for statistical purposes, but use only the numbers, don't go into the persons whose data you are collecting. That is permissible. And next is this concept of pseudonymization. And pseudonymization, all of us are aware, when we used to appear for, in the good old days when used to be university exams, I don't know whether they still have exams in the universities, I'm not sure. It's long ago that I passed out luckily. When the university exams, they used to be known as coding. You know, every exam and every paper would have a code name. It would not have your name, but not would your register number be there. They would transfer into a code and the examiner will see only the code, and the key to the code will be with some clerk who was a very rich man, obviously, and he would be the only person who would know who is the examiner for the particular code number and all. So that is called pseudonymization. Both anonymization and pseudonymization are subject to the technical capability as Sherlock Holmes told Watson long ago, anything that one human being invents can always be uninvented by another human being. So if you have a code, somebody will decode it. If you have encryption, somebody will decrypt it. If you have, what do you call them? The latest thing that's going around. I call it, let me say, a quantum encryption. Somebody will come out with unquantum encryption or something like that. Therefore, ultimately, but that is something that you cannot have. That is life. You must take life as it is, first of all. Therefore, encryption subject to technical feasibility is a necessity, so that the person who takes it does not necessarily have access to the person whose data he has taken, although he may access a volume of data. And then there can be, this is for the purpose of research. Then in life-saving emergency, let us say somebody is admitted to a hospital in Ernakulam, and there is necessity to consult with a doctor or a hospital in Mumbai. Now you don't have time to do all this. You have to necessarily transfer the data and say, what do we do now? How do we save the life of this man? Such a situation also should be a general exception to the consent principle. And then I already talked about minor's consent. Therefore, the line that has been drawn is a minor is somebody who is less than 18. And in such a case, the provision that has been made in the draft bill of 2018, which has more or less been accepted in the 2019 bill also, is that in the case of a minor, any person, of course, you see, the question about a minor is this is the dilemma that we are facing today. To prevent spread of the COVID-19, we have a lockdown. But lockdown has its deleterious consequences. So where do you draw that line? Balance is always a question. Now, if you tell the minor that you can't access internet, you're shutting off a source of knowledge to the minor. But if you allow him access, there are two difficulties. One is the minor may get bombarded by material which is unsuitable to the minor and corrupts his mind. Or in the other alternative is that the minor may be induced to make some false declaration. Like usually you have this, the website sometimes ask you, what is your date of birth? Minors are smart enough to give you a date of birth which will take them beyond 18. It will also say, have you taken your parents' consent? It will always say yes. Now, does it therefore mean that every time a minor accesses it, his parent must sit with him and give consent? That would be too cumbersome. Therefore, we drew a line somewhere and said, hey, look, as far as minors are concerned, nobody below 18 will be treated as a minor, as a major, and they'll be all be treated as minor for the purpose of contractual relationship. It may not be necessary to have parental consent every time. But anybody who regularly advertises or directs material intended to have minors as objects will be specially noticed by the Data Protection Authority as a sensitive fiduciary, a specialized category of data fiduciary, and dealt with separately by regulations. That takes us next to the question of, then there is employment purposes. Now, somebody joins a job, his data is asked, right from the time the first job he took, and from the time he passed his matriculation examination, all degrees, blah, 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 last experience, etc. Now he changes his job. What is to be done with his data? Can the data, supposing he goes from job of A company to B company. B company will say, so-and-so has applied for a job here. So please let us know how good is he or how good he not. And give me some data about you. Should it be done or not? That is normally permitted because at that time, it can be permitted by two ways. One is when you join the company, you may be asked to give a consent there, right then and there. Or by implication, by law, you may say that in such a situation, on the understanding that the employer, the subsequent employer will use it only for employment purposes and nothing else, that data can be transferred. Then you have, for example, the government comes out with, take for example, what is this, Manrega, or your gas cylinder, some benefits has been given, or opening up some conferring cash transfer benefit. In such a situation where there is a statutory or governmental scheme under which some benefit has to be given, then the data may be taken. And at that time, you don't need an express consent from the beneficiary. Now, for example, this is what happened in the case of Aadhaar also. After upholding Aadhaar, if you remember, in the good old days, when Aadhaar was really not subjected to the Supreme Court judgment, everybody used to ask for Aadhaar. You go to a private company, you will say, give me your Aadhaar card. The Supreme Court struck down the whole thing and said, nobody shall ask for Aadhaar unless the government, even the government is not allowed to ask for Aadhaar, unless there is a law empowering it, which is what is applicable in because of the amendment made in the Tax Act, Income Tax Act, or where a citizen wants a benefit from the state, that is the government, and for that purpose, the state may ask for Aadhaar card. So this kind of asking for a benefit from the state authority and for that purpose calling upon him to give details is permitted. And there you are either, one can say there is a presumed consent, or even if you are not consenting, it's a situation where your consent is not necessary. Then we have situation of whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are obviously people who are not going to take the consent of the person against whom they are blowing the whistle. So in such a case, there is no question of consent being taken. But then there is one difficulty there, that the law as to whistleblowers and the whistleblower, like, I'm not sure whether I don't think they have a Whistleblowers Protection Act in this country, have I? I'm not that I recall. But in other countries, jurisdictions.
Except 195. Except 195A.
No,
which has been added. Witness.
In a private
For
company.
a witness.
See, 195 is all right for a government servant. What happens in a private company?
Witness, only for a witness.
That's okay. In a witness is all right. But I'm talking about whistleblower. Whistleblower is much earlier than the witness. Before Therefore, there is no protection. So it's time that this Data Protection Act is coupled with the whistleblower protection in order to make this exception meaningful. Then we come to what is this concept of processing of data. Now, processing of data is not necessarily mean you take it and manufacture something out of it. For example, I told you, you go to a shop. That shopkeeper will enter your data every time on the computer, and that remains on the computer. So even storing of the data is treated as processing for the purposes of the Act. The processing may be very widely defined to include all operations, including mere storage. Now, as a rule, it should be with the consent of the data principal. Then all these concepts will apply. There should be the purpose limitation. For what purpose are you taking it? For that purpose only. Then time limitation for this duration only. Then processing of all data, including accessing of personal data. Then one comes to this question of when can the state access the data? The state has the right to access the data of a citizen or even a non-citizen, a resident in India. No, before that I must tell you, the Act is intended to apply to all citizens, non-citizens, and residents of the country, all companies, trusts, and other institutions registered in the country, and also to Indians, something like Section 4 of the Indian Penal Code.
Penal Code. Extraterritorial.
So all Indians transacting, sitting elsewhere and doing the transaction. And finally, the extraterritorial operation is a little wider than Section 4 of the IPC. If there is a company which is a foreign company but continuously trying to advertise its goods for the benefit of Indian citizens, the law says, at least the bill says, that they will be covered by the Act. It's an interesting proposition which is intended to control the deleterious effects of propagation of goods. So now, when all this happens, one issue arises, like the debates always is, where do you draw the fine balance between a fundamental right and imposition of a restriction on that? Now, there are 2-3 things that are very important to notice. One, that first of all, remember I told you it is under Article 21. 21 is the right to life itself. Now, what happened in the case of right to life? For example, freedom of an individual, right from A.K. Gopalan's case to the Lord Leach's case, whichever the Supreme Court has decided yesterday or day before yesterday, I don't know. The law has always been that these must be treated very, of course, very, very carefully and ensure that the fundamental rights are upheld unless they fall within the parameters subject to which only the constitutional validity will be upheld. Now, fortunately for us, we need not take a survey of the law. In the Aadhaar case itself, the Supreme Court laid down the 3 fundamental principles of constitutional parameters. One is that it can be done only by a legislation passed by the parliament. Now, what is this legislation? Otherwise, what will happen is the Babu sitting in the secretariat can issue an executive order and take away your fundamental rights. There must be a warrant in a legislative enactment. The legislative enactment must declare the objective. For what purpose am I asking for this restriction on fundamental right? And then it must also tell you for suitability, or what they call the rational connection, that there must be. Now, it is possible that you will pass a law in Parliament and say that I intend for the purpose of COVID, containment of COVID, that all girls should wear yellow saris. It's absurd. What is that to do with? There must be a rational connection with what you are trying to do and what the objective of the law is. If the objective of the law is COVID, then wearing a yellow sari is not going to solve it. Of course, most of them will object to wearing sari. That is another matter. But wearing a yellow sari has nothing to do with it. Why am I showing this? The absurdity or irrationality of the law is one ground on which it fails constitutionally. Then next is that it should be necessary that there is no alternative method which is as efficacious of carrying out the objective other than infringement of the fundamental right. That is another test that has been laid down. And finally, proportionality. Now, if you want to kill a fly, you use only a fly swatter. You don't use a howitzer or you don't use an atom bomb. Therefore, the law should not go beyond what is absolutely required for the purpose stated in the law. Now, these are some of the things that have been laid down over a period of time from 1950 till 2020. And in any case, they have been highlighted in the other judgment, the triple test. The advantage of this is, subject to this, the state should be enabled to infringe the fundamental right or restrict the fundamental right of right to privacy. Now, for example, if the state wants to do criminal investigation, or let's say they are chasing some terrorists, or the question is that military secrets are being leaked out, they want to catch the persons who are culprits. Should the state have the liberty of accessing the data of a particular person who is suspected without his consent or not, is a question. Now, to that the answer that was given in the draft bill of 2018 was, yes, as long as you have an enactment, a suitable enactment, and this being a parliamentary subject, this being data protection being a parliamentary enactment, either in this or by a separate legislation, which empowers the state to do it under the circumstances, who will do it, the methodology of doing it, how it can be done, blah, 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 then it should not be done, was what we had said in a negative fashion to ensure that nobody will do it. But fortunately or unfortunately, the 2019 bill has watered down this provision. 2019 bill says, at any time the government may, in the interest of sovereignty or foreign relations, that usual mantra that is there in Article 19(2) of the Constitution, it can restrict the fundamental right. That by itself, in my opinion, and this is purely my personal opinion, not the Supreme Court will decide someday or the other, that such a declaration is of no use. As I told you, I cannot sit somewhere and pass a legislation and say that in the interest of sovereignty of the country, I insist that everybody should be wearing a mundu. What nonsense is this? I can wear a mundu, I can wear a pajama, I can wear trousers. Does it affect the sovereignty? So somebody has to test it. And I'm sure the 32 wise men in Delhi will go into this question someday or the other, and they'll take a wise decision on that. But today, there is no law. That is the point that I'm saying. So I don't know how many of you are aware that when Arogya Setu was bruited about, the press people asked me a question. I said, unhesitatingly, it is illegal. I said, where is the law which warrants it? Where is the law which backs it? How do they take away this kind of, infringe my fundamental right to privacy? So I'm glad the Supreme Court went on a back foot, the government went on a back foot, and they now said it is not mandatory. And even at the airport, it is not mandatory. So therefore, the question is, the state can be entitled to take away your rights, infringe your fundamental rights, only on the assumption that it is doing for the larger good for protection of the fundamental rights of every country, every citizen or every resident of this country. And that has to be warranted by a legislative enactment made for that purpose, indicating all these 4 or 5 tests that the Supreme Court has most often highlighted. If that is done, such a law is constitutionally valid, and under a constitutionally permissible law which complies with the constitutional parameters, it would be enough that your consent then will not be a very relevant issue. The state can take away your data, and there is no question of infringing of the fundamental right, because that is permitted by the constitutionally valid legislation. Then we come to a few more issues. I talked of Data Protection Authority. Data Protection Authority can classify the data fiduciaries depending on their volume of data that they process, depending on the type of data that they process, depending on the consequences of the breach of data, and enact separate regulations in order to ensure that there is personal data process is properly protected. Now, I also said that there is something like categorization of data. Now, data can be a very simple thing. It may be a question of my name, it may be a question of my health data, my political views, my religious affiliation, my social affiliation, so many things. Now, some of it may be sensitive, some may not be that sensitive. Now, therefore, with regard to sensitive data, there has to be a different type of regulation of the sensitive data. So, now there is one more controversy that is arisen under the bill, which I must highlight. How far can data be allowed to cross the borders of this country? Now, this is a very important question on which Parliament is still not even debating. I think they're right now in suspension. It is seized in, the Parliament is in season, as they call it. They are considering it because of the JPC. What is it that is bothering them? What is it that is bothering the rest of the world? There are a whole lot of foreign companies doing business on the soil of India. What do? Let us take ABC. I don't want to name the companies. Let's take ABC company. ABC company's headquarters is in a foreign company, a foreign territory known as Timbuktu. I like Timbuktu because it was something that I used to, my teacher used to tell me when I was in school. I did not know where it was till I looked at the atlas. I don't know how many of you know where Timbuktu is. Anyway, Timbuktu is a place in Africa. It's a coastal place in Africa. Now, in Timbuktu is the headquarters. All the data that is collected in India as a result of transactions is automatically transferred to Timbuktu and kept in a big server there. Now, I told you earlier that the application of the law is every company that is registered in India and does business in India automatically gets covered by this act. So for some reason, it becomes necessary. Let's say I have transacted something with that company and somewhere along the line, somebody gets a suspicion that I am a terrorist. Of course, I look like a terrorist, but I'm not a terrorist. So the investigating authority goes to him and says, please give me Mr. Sri Krishna's data from this point of time to this point of time. That man obviously will say, sir, I'm not keeping the data here. The data is in Timbuktu. Please apply it to the government of Timbuktu and get it from there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is what is known as Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty between countries, under which it is agreed that whenever there is a legal assistance required, the other country will automatically help. Something like your extradition, which is going on and on and on and on. The reason I'm pointing out is they have worked out that it takes on an average between 18 months to 2 years to get any answer under the MLAT. Now, if somebody is trying to investigate me here and now for something that I have done, and he is told that you apply under the MLAT, what happens under the MLAT? Now, first of all, an application has to be made to a judicial authority. Then after processing, it will go to a government of India. And the government of India, through diplomatic channels, will transfer it to Timbuktu. Then Timbuktu will go down on the way to some judge there. The judge will say, okay, after hearing parties, hearing all objections and appeals and Supreme Court appeals and all that, then it will come back the same way. They assume that it will be done in 2 years. Now, you can't afford to do all that. Therefore, it is necessary that the investigating authority or the government here should have access to it then and there. Therefore, we had suggested in the 2018 bill that you do one thing, you keep it wherever you want, I don't care, but have an exact mirror copy updated here so that if in case of necessity arises, there should be direct access available without waste of time, without expenditure of time, talent and energy and money. Now, this was objected to by all the foreign companies. Wherever I went for, we had, I didn't tell you all this. The process was we put up first a white paper in the public domain, invited objections and responses to it. Then we had public interaction in 6 different cities where we had a lot of interaction with the persons who wanted. We got responses from across the domain, from academicians, lawyers, not present, sitting judges now, former judges, then ordinary citizens, foreign companies and all that. After assessing all that, we came to this conclusion, this is the best for the country. Now, coming back to the transfer of cross-border, the objection that was raised by the foreign companies is that, hey, this will mean that I have to have more expenditure involved in this. That will unnecessarily increase the business costs. Now, increase of business costs in a foreign jurisdiction is something that every wise man knows is going to happen. Now, what happens if tomorrow the tariff rates are increased in India? If the customs duty rates go up in India, if the income tax rate goes up in India, you can't say that it's increasing my business. You know how to get out of it. You know what to do with it. Therefore, I honestly told them that this is the least applicable of, least appealable of all the arguments, and doesn't impress me at all. But anyway, there was so much of lobbying done that even some special executive officer from US had come and met the Prime Minister and Finance Minister and all that. Finally, the bill has watered down, but actually, according to me, the watered down provision does not take it any further. They have said, sensitive, now I'm talking the 2019 bill which has been referred to the JPC. They have said, you may maintain it on a server anywhere in any other jurisdiction. And you may process sensitive data with the consent of the person or the data principal, with the understanding that it will be brought back whenever is necessary or something. I don't think that really solves the problem, because there is a second limb to the argument which they have not addressed. That data may be useful if it is generated in the country and used for the purpose of data analytics to find solutions to a number of other issues. Now that has no access to this. Now everybody, see what has happened. I have always called it in all public interactions as the unreserved third-class passenger mentality. I used to travel in unreserved third-class passenger as a young boy. And we found that as soon as the train came to the platform, some coolie will pay 8 annas to the coolie. 8 annas is a good amount in those days. The coolie will spread your bed on that. And like that, everybody would occupy all the seats. And afterwards, if some other passenger came, they would say, no place here, please go, please go, please go. Now, this is exactly what is happening. All the development I don't know what number I can give you. I'll say millions of data of ours. And now that we want to utilize data for our own purposes, they're saying, no, you can't do this, you can't do this. Why? Because it's going to affect their revenue stream. That is the whole objective. Now, the question then is, you want to talk of sovereignty of this country, sovereignty of my data, and get up and say that this is my data. You want to do business here, do it on my terms. You can't do business here on your terms. This is the issue that is bothering them, and they are unable to take a call on that. And let's see whatever happens. I'm only waiting. So this is about transferring data across the border. There is, of course, there are two other issues which are connected with it. One is what is known as adequacy test. What is the adequacy test? You know, GDPR is really a very interesting. GDPR is General Data Protection Regulations, which is applicable across Europe. Which was tried out for almost 5 years, and finally it came into existence last year. 2 years.
Sir, the voice is
Somewhere
breaking.
in the month of June.
Audio, some audio problem.
Audio is breaking, sir. Now it's okay. Yeah.
Sorry?
The audio was breaking, sir. The voice was breaking.
Okay. I thought somebody was correcting me on 2 years. I think it is 2 years because I've been called upon to join a webinar on that somewhere at the end of this month. So, what is known as the adequacy test? The adequacy test is permit the transfer of data across the border. Do not permit transfer of data across the border for the simple reason. You can have a law here which will say that privacy of data is to be protected in this fashion and give detailed reasoning, detailed methodology for that. Now, if it goes to another country and those chaps don't bother about it, your data will get leaked out from there. There will be a breach of your data privacy at that point of time. Therefore, this question of adequacy test, that means you and your company should be allowed to transfer data from India to another territory unless you enter into some kind of a contract, binding contract, after ensuring that the same set of regulations or similar regulations are available for protection of data at the other end also. So unless that is there, do not permit it. And this is something that the government can really look into, and the Data Protection Authority can make detailed regulations like the SEBI has made for capital markets. Then there is an interesting thing like deletion of data. I'm sure all of you are on the Facebook. Okay, really doing it. So I'm fed up at what you want to edit your name. You can tell Facebook what data you collected.
Voice is again breaking, sir. Voice is again breaking.
Voice is breaking. Oh, God.
Yes.
What shall I do?
Yes, sir. Might be some network
All
issue.
that I can clear my. The voice is not because of me, but because of me.
Yes. Technology. Some technical snack.
The internet speed is not. Yeah.
Could be the bandwidth
This is
problem.
exactly what I was pointing out. Exactly. Bandwidth problem. I started looking into 92 or 93 or something like that. Bandwidth is always a problem in this country. Again, bandwidth has the third-class passenger mentality. The defense services have occupied so much. They don't want to yield anything to it. So you say, I got this, I'm not going to allow anybody to come into my compartment.
There's a problem on the video also, sir. Both audio and video, there's a problem now.
You cannot be heard and seen.
Even the technology is jealous of your lecture, sir.
The data piracy. Some data piracy going on.
Ramu, you're right.
We had some piracy in the beginning. He was trying to get it.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Now his video is off, I think.
Yeah, I think sir has
Switch it off.
I probably must be changing. Sir must be changing the iPhone.
Sir is here. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think there's a new Wi-Fi connection now. Yeah, I think so. Sir, now you are visible. Now you are visible.
Visible.
Sound.
Visible
Audio,
on the point.
audio needs to be little more. Sir, can I make a small suggestion? In case in your room or in the premises somebody else is using the gadgets, you can ask them just stop it because the bandwidth will improve.
That is the lesser the connections, the better.
You can ask people to switch off their videos. The bandwidth will improve.
Correct.
That's also right. Yeah, you are right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me at least?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We can see you
Okay.
also, sir.
Oh, you can see me also. Good. Not that it's a very good sign. All right.
Go on.
Now, there is another. I was talking about the cross-border
Deletion.
transfer.
Deletion of
There are
data.
applications where called
Deletion of data.
deletion of data. The right to delete data. That's correct. Now, for example, I was saying even Facebook allows it, and they put the whole thing and send it back to you. Therefore, a data principal's right is to say that, sorry, I don't want you to process my data, please return it to me, and they will return it to you. They are bound to return it to you because the Lord for the law is. Then there is this concept also known as
Audio and video do not synchronize.
Sorry?
Again, video gone. Video and
Gone.
audio also doesn't synchronize.
So what shall I do?
Yes, better now, sir. It's better. I think you could continue. Some of us are trying to.
Have we got an expert there?
See, I get a message here, internet connection is unstable. Thank God that I am stable. Thank God that I am stable at least.
Sir, you have to unmute, sir. You are not unmuted yourself. Please, yeah.
Unmute chedu.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, now at least you can hear me. Then there is another concept known as privacy by design. See, every data fiduciary, of course, something akin to what happened. Before Vishakha, there was nothing like law against workplace. Supreme Court Vishakha guidelines. They said this is what you must upload. He says, advise them. Every employee must be advised how to treat women at the workplace and all that. Now that has subsequently been done by way of parliamentary legislation, which is applicable today. So this is intended something like that. That data privacy is something of a new concept which needs to be, driven home to every human being in this country. Therefore, everybody, every company must have a policy of educating all employees as to the right protection of their privacy of data of the individuals. Now, every data fiduciary, that means a person or rather an entity who receives data for processing, must put in place policies which are designed to ensure data privacy and educate all persons working on these aspects of data privacy. Put into place such cybersecurity measures which would effectively safeguard against breach of data privacy. Ensure against breach of privacy of data by individuals as well as by technological methodologies. Breach of privacy can be two-way. One is you have excellent human technical apparatus is so bad that somebody can hack into it and take away data. Or conversely, you have excellent technical apparatus and machinery, but your employees will go and breach it. Most of the time in Aadhaar, that was the case. Then notify the Data Protection Authority in case of any data breach. For example, the Reserve Bank has issued a circular, actually Reserve Bank and Telecom for two entities which even law came into force. Both of them said all data generated in India must remain in India. Reserve Bank issued a circular, all financial data will process only in India. Similarly, the Telecom it's also issued a circular and said all telecom data will be protected. We are thinking of sending men to moon, but we can't maintain steady internet. That is my problem. Imagine talking to somebody on the moon with this kind of internet. Today, private ensure that there is data breach. Reserve Bank has issued a circular that within 7 days, investigation has to be made and a notice be given to the Reserve Bank about breach of data privacy. And there should be an obligation to carry out periodical assessment. Like you have data, like you have periodical audits in a bank. Similarly, you should have data audits saying that are your systems good, is there data ensuring cyber security methodologies are. Koreans are, in my entire career as a judge, several times people tried to gag my voice. Several times.
But only voice, not the judgments.
Nobody was able successfully in doing that. And although people tried periodically.
These are the new challenges, sir. New challenges.
Yeah, I know. And I'm too old now and feeble to fight back. Every employee, every entity which can be the data fiduciary must employ a full-time officer described as data protection officer, whose job is to ensure that the data in the entity is properly protected and then the privacy by design operates throughout and everybody is made aware of it. And if there is any difficulty, he should immediately get in touch with the Data Protection Authority and then take all necessary steps as advised by him. One question is always asked to me is,
oh, great discovery. Voice is not audible.
Even the video is frozen.
Yes, audio failed again and video also.
I think there's a bandwidth problem in sir's room.
I think that's the issue.
Some piracy going on. Data piracy. Some data piracy going on.
Possible, Damu, because this is actually a subject going in depth.
Yes.
The question has been asked to me, saying that this is a central legislation, there will be Data Protection Authority, and who will be sitting in Delhi. How can you control what happens all over the country? So that my answer is that's nothing unusual. If there have been several central legislation, for example, take the Employees Provident Fund Act. There is a central commissioner in Delhi, and there every state has a regional commissioner, and every district probably has an officer who enforces it. Take what happens in the case of Employee State Insurance Act. So it is Factories Act for that matter. There's a chief inspector of factories sitting in Delhi, and every state has its chief inspector, state chief inspector, and every regional office, there will be a regional office which deals with it. Similarly, with regard to enforcement of labor statutes. So what is special about data? Data also can be done. Then there can be a Data Protection Authority wherever it sits in Delhi or in Ernakulam. It doesn't make much difference to us. Today, we have got videos, to have got video conferences, we have got electronic communication. Of course, it fails quite often, that's another matter. But we are most of electronic communication today. So you can still carry on with this. So it can be done easily without any difficulty. Then we come to another concept of classification of data fiduciaries. Now, classification of data fiduciaries is depending on the type of data handled, volume of data processed, likelihood of harm in case of data breach, and the turnover, use of technology. These are various parameters on which the data fiduciary can be classified, and appropriate regulations made to operate. Now, take for example what happens in the factory's case. A factory which does some small bottling, makes some bottles or corks or bottles, is different from a factory which, like our Bhopal gas tragedy. You have those very serious incidents happening. Take, for example, the nuclear power establishment in Kodangolam. The regulations applicable for ensuring the safety of the people inside and outside the establishment are quite different there as compared to another small factory that where you do some churning or turning or something like that. Therefore, similarly, depending on the nature of data, volume of data, cause the likelihood of breach resulting in serious damage, the classification can be made and appropriate regulations put in place to ensure that there is least likelihood of damage being caused to people. Then one more issue that needs to be talked of is exemptions. Now, what has happened in the 2019 bill is that they have made a sort of a general exemption that government may exempt any or all sections of the act from applicable to government establishment. Now, please note that the idea was that the Data Protection Act, Personal Data Protection Act, should apply across the board to all entities, private as well as public. It would apply to private companies, public companies, societies, trusts, government departments, public sector banks, and public sector entities. Now, obviously, the government was not very happy with it. So they wanted an exemption saying that any time we may exempt any of government entities from doing that. Whether that is justified or not, whether that is rational or not, is a matter on which there can be a lot of debate. The reason is, moment you say you are exempting them, then you are exempting from all or any sections. Now the section which asks you to maintain privacy, maintain the privacy without breach, you may exempt a person, and in which case he will say, I'm sorry. If you remember, there was a good time when in case of accident in public sector companies also, the Motor Accident Act tribunals had no jurisdiction. They would say that, sorry, this is an entity that's been run by a government company, therefore there will be no claim entertained. I mean, it's something like saying the king does no wrong. In England, if you remember, that was the idea. But today that doesn't work in India, and hopefully it will not work in India. Whatever it is, government is as much liable because, you know, the moment the government enters the domain of private commercial domains of commercial contracts or commercial transactions, there is no reason to give any special exemption to government on any ground, except like treating it, make it a level playing which is applicable to all commercial establishments. So that is one issue on which probably there is some rethinking up to the government. Then as I talked of the Puttaswamy judgment, the Aadhaar judgment, talked of the triple criteria laid down, which would enable the government to, the parliament to pass a legislation granting exemption from consent to state under certain circumstances. Then I have already talked about research and archiving purposes. And then one more exemption is, now if I decide to invite all of you to my house for lunch or dinner after the COVID-19 is over, lockdown is removed. I can't invite 35 people at the same time. I'll assume it's possible. The least I can do is make a list of all of you, your email, your telephone number, address, so that I can send any. Or let's say I have a marriage in my family and I want to invite all of you. I'll require this data. Now, if I collect this data, I have to comply with this Personal Data Protection Act. That would be silly. Therefore, there is one exemption. If you are using it for domestic purposes, not necessary to apply the law. There should be an exemption available there. Then, journalistic purposes. Now, or for processing in a court, I want to file a suit against somebody. I need his data. Without his data, what am I going to do? I need the data as to what the cause of action is, where he is available, where is properties are to be attached. So that kind of exemption is permissible under the Act. Then, and finally, manual processing by small and the corner, what do you call them? Shop. What do you call them in Malayalam? I've forgotten. The shop, kade.
Kada.
Kada, the street corner kada. Who sells you pan, bidi, cigarette. No,
Pettikada.
Petty shop.
Petty shop. All. Now he will have an account. If I'm regularly buying cigarettes from there, he will have an account. Now that is also data data actually. He will have my name, address, and the amount of money that I owe to him. Now obviously the law cannot be applied to him. So petty establishments, which do only manual. But if that fellow is starting to have a computer, he will be covered by the Act. Therefore, therefore, if he is doing only by handwriting in some chopra, some book or something, then the exemption applies to him. He is not covered by the Act. So the rigor of the Act will not apply to him. Then I talked of Data Protection Authority, who is the regulator of all data protection in the country. He has to appoint an adjudicating officer because there is going to be disputes, whether there has been a breach, what is the consequence of the breach, now whether damage has been caused, how much damage has been caused, somebody has to adjudicate. Therefore, there has to be an adjudicator, even like you have for the SEBI or for the insurance authority or for the third bank, like any other regulator. Then he should prescribe codes of practice which are acceptable across all the sectors and turn them into regulations after dialogue with the stakeholders. Then it is his job to monitor and enforce the obligations of the data fiduciaries and enforce the rights of the data principals. He has a right to levy penalties that may go up to, he had suggested 5 crores or 5% of the total worldly turnover, global turnover. Now those are arbitrary things that can be whatever the law ultimately decides. Then he can give directions, order data audit in specific cases, or generally, periodically, what kind of data auditors have to be appointed. These are all the sums that come within his jurisdiction. Then a data fiduciary who is recalcitrant, who says, I don't care whatever order you may pass, can be subjected to penal liability, prosecuted before a regular court, and that is to be declared as a criminal offense. And one more thing, commencement of the law. Now, as I told you, every legislation has a commencement available in some of the legislation, say from such date as the executive may notify. The interesting thing here is, we had assumed that it would be sufficient to give an elbow room of almost a year and a half, 6 months for establishment of the data protection, 2.5, 6 months for establishment of the data protection authority and a period of 2 years, over which the any section or as many sections or all of them could be implemented either all at one go or in piecemeal as the executive may determine. But now the bill circulated in Parliament says it will be made applicable from such date as the executive may notify. What if the executive does not notify it for the next 15 years? The law will not be there at all. Now that is actually, I think there is a petition pending in the Supreme Court saying that an executive cannot defeat the legislative wisdom by saying that I am not notified yet. I'm not sure that somewhere I read that there is a petition pending in the Supreme Court, and my knowledge of the Supreme Court is at least 15 years old. I don't know what the latest position. Korean will be able to enlighten us on that. And then, now I come to the major, there are small nitty-gritties, I'm not going to take time on that. The major differences between the 2018 bill made by the committee and what has been circulated in Parliament and referred to the JPC. Number one, no constitutional safeguards have been provided. Whereas we had said that no such, the state shall not in any way infringe the fundamental rights and take it away without the consent of the data principle, without an appropriate parliamentary enactment. That has been done away with it, and simply by a declaration made by the executive, it can be now infringed. Number two, there is no definite date of commencement. As I said, it may be postponed indefinitely. Number three, on data localization, what has been achieved is some kind of a neither fish nor fowl solution, which I don't think satisfies either one of us. And it's to be seen how it's going to play out. Number 4. Now this is something serious. What is the act called? Act is called Personal Data Protection Act. In fact, the notification appointing the committee was to look into personal data protection. Whole of Aadhaar was about personal data protection. Puttaswamy judgment was about personal data protection. If any of you has read the report of the committee, we had discussed maybe half a chapter or one chapter, I'm not sure, saying that there can be situations when can there be non-personal data. Non-personal data can be of various kinds. Now, we talked of community data and things like that. For example, I'll give you an example. Now, all of you are experts on computers, despite the internet failings, that you come across what is known as Google. Google has regularly this Google Maps. If you go to the Google Map, you'll note that it will not only show you from where to go to where, but it also shows you what restaurants are there, what beauty shops are there, what shopping malls are there on the way. How did the Google know about it? This is because those people, in the interest of enlarging their business, put that information into the Google's hands. So as a result of which, the community has got a lot of its data in the hands of somebody who can use it. Now, community data may be useful for several reasons: for agricultural purposes, for determining traffic patterns, or for determining other kinds of obstructions in any commutation, or for determining what should be the pattern of bus routes, metro routes, and things like that, density of traffic and all. Now, therefore, we said this is some issue which needs to be carefully scrutinized. Therefore, and anyway, this is not personal data protection. Therefore, we'll leave it at this point of time. Let there be a separate expert committee go into it and decide what should be done about it. A separate legislation will take care of it. But unfortunately, this has been sneaked into the bill by a small section somewhere at the end, saying that at any time the government may authorize access to non-personal data also. The dangerous implication of that is, when you said non-personal data, what can be non-personal data? Every company will have, of course, there are two types of non-personal data. One may be protected by intellectual protection rights laws, IPR laws. I'm not talking of them. The IPR laws will take care of them. Now, what should be the business strategy of the company in the next 5 years? What is the acquisition and merger that I propose to do? These are all matters which are non-personal. They have nothing to do with the individual. But yet, they affect the financial viability, financial stability of a business entity. Now, does it mean that this section authorizes the government anytime to access this kind of thing? It's not very clear, and if it does, it is the most disastrous situation. Therefore, that needs to be debated upon. And there is one more section added, which is very innocuously worded, which is intended to control indirectly all intermediaries like your WhatsApp, and the section is also very peculiarly worded. I'll just read out the section 84 of, and the last section is. $85,000. No, that's offenses. It says, there is one section which says that they may issue directions to ensure that all the intermediaries, like your WhatsApp or any of these transactional things, to take the details and declarations from consumers who use it regularly and subject to such control as the government may bid. It's a method of indirectly controlling such intermediaries, which of course would be a serious challenge to freedom of expression that needs to be played out appropriately. Now, these are some of the issues that I have considered relevant. I'm not going into the nitty-gritties, section by section reading and all that. That let the parliament do it. It is their job. Now, this is more or less what I think was relevant from the point of view of data control. And data, privacy of data, a legislation on that is absolutely necessary today. As I was saying, this is in the interest of, naturally, in the way I look at it, all laws must be intended for the benefit of these citizens. Now, it is not as if that the citizen has to kowtow to the laws. The laws are intended for his benefit and must ensure that his interests are protected, his rights are protected, his fundamental rights are of course protected beyond all that. Now, an attempt has been made to balance all these conflicting rights and how far, which will succeed. It is like a tug of war. We don't know what is going to happen, who is going to pull which side and which side is going to win. We'll see what happens. The JP, in fact, when this is an interesting thing, I didn't realize that the government was going to attach so much importance to my words. When the journalist interviewed me as soon as the report was over, I said it's too complicated for Parliament to debate on it, and it's better that it is heard by an expert committee of Parliament. So immediately the law minister picked it up, and the day he moved the bill, he said it's necessary to move it to JPC, and it has gone to the JPC. The JPC is sitting on it. Let's see what the JPC does. And finally, that will be the law. But then I am not concerned with the nitty-gritties of the law, but I was only concerned with the principles. Any law that is done is bound to be done on these principles. And to the extent they follow these principles or not, to the extent they ensure that your fundamental rights are guaranteed or not, is something that you'll all have to see and then consider it from our perspective. That's all, friends, that I have to say about data control protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. In spite of all the interruptions and issues that involve, like you said, sir, nobody can stop you from completing what you'll have to say, sir. Wonderful. Sir, may I request Justice Kurian also, sir, to add some.
No, there's nothing. I don't want to, what you call, spoil the taste of by the wonderful meal by getting another pudding. It was so wonderful and it was so nice to listen to you, sir.
Thank you.
I really salute you, the way that you keep your memory, the depth of your knowledge, the way you analyzed it. You have been a far superb person than what we have seen you in Kerala. We have worked with you, but your memory, your talents have gone manyfold up. Thank you so much. That's just so nice. So it's actually very excellent because it's a new legislation, new regime altogether. People, old people like me have no idea at all. Only youngsters like you have some idea.
Korean, compared to you, I'm Nachal Sala. I'm the oldest one sitting around here.
I'm only saying it was so nice listening to you. It's a very technical subject, but you have covered the entire depth and breadth of it.
You see, what has happened is because of this, I have received invitations to go to Europe, I received invitation to go to Singapore twice, and I'm going to be invited to some university in Singapore to go and deliver a lecture on this. I said, good, let's see. They have a lot to learn from us. In fact, as I was telling them, there is a webinar sometime on 26th, I think, of this month on 2 years of GDPR. I got a call from London saying that, sir, we want you in any case to come and talk about this. I said, okay, I'll talk about it. How far GDPR has been successful. Anyway, it's something new. It's worthwhile learning new things in life. So I'm happy to meet all of you. I wish I could come more frequently to Kerala. Now, of course, it's out of question. When things settle down, I'll certainly meet all of you. some trip, a long-standing trip to Kerala is there.
Sir, with webinar, distance is no problem.
I know, but webinar doesn't give the great joy.
Personal touch, yes.
Webinar is always, I agree. In fact, I am great votary of e-courts. There is a big report made by one of the social activist organizations. They came to me first and they had a lot of discussion. They had a lot of course, all by webinar only. Then they formulated a report and they said, will you write a foreword to that? I wrote a foreword to it. I have transmitted to the Chief Justice of India and to the Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud and said, hey chaps, forget what is happening in pandemic. Even after pandemic, this is something that you can do because it gives you two advantages. One, its advantage is that a person did not come all the way to Supreme Court to Delhi to do this. I mean, there are some things which can be done easily on this virtual court. Number two, first of all, it will reduce the pressure on the courts if you dispose of matters like this. I'm not saying you should do everything on virtual court. You can, of course, hear a lot of things on physically. Number two, it gives an outreach. Now, somebody sitting in Pattanam Thitta cannot talk of Delhi. He'll say, oh, I don't have money, sir. I can't go. I can't afford it. Now, he can engage a lawyer there and the lawyer can argue and impress a judge sitting in Delhi and his job will be done. The outreach is tremendous. At one time, even an ordinary telephone was such a big nuisance. You know, you did not have places. Every time you had to make a call, you had to have a trunk call and all that. But today, look at what happened. Everybody carries a mobile. With the help of that, you can talk to anybody in the world. Yes. Communication has become, of course, subject to internet. That always is there. But theoretically, it is possible, no? So theoretically, it is possible to run the court virtually. They also have put in some provisos and riders saying that assuming that internet is stable, assuming that your contention doesn't halfway through the argument stop.
Justice Chandrachud is the chairman of the E-committee now.
No, I know. I sent it to him also. Let's see what happens. And I spoke to CJI also and I told him that this is, let's see. Everybody shows interest and then slowly then.
All your boys are there now, sir?
Yeah, all my boys are there. I know.
Sir, we have a couple of questions coming in. Can we...
Go ahead. In fact, I was about to ask you. Are there any questions?
Yes, sir. Sushant Samudra has raised his hand. Sushant, please go ahead.
Yeah, what is it?
Sir, first of all, it was a fantastic session and I'm practicing in this area of cyber laws and it was a very, very insightful session. I must really say that I've been doing a lot of work on GDPR and other countries' data protection law. I think it's given me a very good exposure. Okay. First of all, thank you for that. I have a couple of questions, sir, to just put forth before you.
Yeah.
So first thing I would just want to ask you that, you know, whatever be the nature of the bill, but I feel that the implementation is a very, very big challenge in India. So yeah. I wanted to just take your take because now that also we had IT rules 2011, we have Information Technology Act section 43 and things like that. But I felt that the implementation was not that effective rather when we compared to GDPR and things like that. I was surprised when a lot of companies approached me during the May last week when the GDPR came into picture. Even small companies who were having about just one mobile application, they also came to me for consultation. So just wanted to check with you, so what do you think that is going to be really...
Okay. As far as implementation is concerned, the IPC has been in operation for so many years now. How many? More than 100 years. Huh? It's being properly implemented.
So very specific to data protection.
No, I am asking you, implementation is another issue altogether. We in India are very good. We are long on laws and short on implementation. The question is, data protection law will be implemented with the same efficacy as Companies Act or the IPC or any of the IPR laws. There can't be any better protection. There can't be any better implementation. Implementation is a matter of one's will. If you have the will to implement it, you can implement it. Otherwise, it will go slack. That's the whole point.
So one more aspect that was actually, I had a query was that regarding the critical personal data. That was one more area.
Yeah, I know. Critical personal data is an issue which is left open. See what happened when this was being argued in the committee. I as usual, I always cause the mischief and I let it go at that. So I said, hey, you want to transfer data to somewhere else, but why should the data of my Prime Minister, my President, my Chief Justice of India should be transferred to some other country and carry it there? Such things should be called critical data and maintained in India without hesitation. But somewhere along the line, critical data has not been defined. It has been left open to the government now. So the government may say, you see, it would have been, I think it was somewhat of a mistake that we didn't define it. We could have defined it as data which is critical because it relates to a person or whose functions are critical to the country. That would have been easy to understand. We left it open and the government today may notify what is critical data without this kind of rational application of mind. I hope that somewhere along the line somebody will... Look, these things are to be debated in parliament and then finalized. Look at all the parliamentary debates of this country. Of course, now there are no debates in the parliament. What can I do?
So one last question that I have is...
I'll answer your question. Unfortunately, all the debates take place at 9 o'clock on TV, not in parliament. That is the unfortunate thing in this country. Yes, go ahead.
So one more thing is that a lot of reliance has been put up on the government with regard to this data being processed by them at any point of time, but without even proper consent from the user. A lot of this one has been given, but I would just like to talk of in our state of Telangana, basically, the vehicular data, especially when we talk about Road Transport Authority, the RTA, a lot of data which is available with regard to the vehicle owner's information is actually put up for sale for consideration, depending on the kinds of turnover.
That is because there is no act applicable today. If the act is applicable, you would immediately slap a notice on him. That is
so don't you think that such kinds of issues will crop up in case the too much reliance of power is put on the government?
Where is power in the hands of the government? This law is applicable to the government establishments. It's as much as it is applicable to private establishments. So the data regulation authority can slap a notice on him if he is honest. If he is not honest, I don't know what will happen. All law is made on the footing that the executive is honest, the person empowered to implement is honest. Now, if you were a police officer, you're not honest, even murder goes undetected.
Yes. In the hands of an unscrupulous officer, nobody is safe.
Sir, it is said about our constitution also. If it goes into bad hands.
Correct. What is happening in the world? Yes, that's correct. Even in the constitution, goes into bad hands. We had an emergency.
Yes, Dr. Ambedkar said it.
Yeah. And we saw it in 1975. What happened? Brilliant minds came to the conclusion and said it's an emergency. And we suffered it. We'll survive all that, don't worry.
Yeah, one instance.
Sushant, are you done?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, we have Manish Chowdhury. Manish, can you just unmute and put your question first?
Yes, Manish Chowdhury.
Yes. Thank you for the session, sir. Just the question was regarding when you said about data sharing for employment purposes. Yes. So many companies do the vetting procedures regarding the background of a person, and they also look into the data of the person. So what are your stand regarding this procedure followed by many companies, sir?
There should be an exemption. No, otherwise, if you remember, even in the law of contract, under common law, information shared by an employer about his employee was exempt from this kind of an action at the instance of the employee. Employee can't, supposing I have an employee and he is dishonest and I sacked him. And next employer asks me for a referral, I tell him, no, he is dishonest. Can he file a suit against defamation suit against me? He cannot. He is protected today, even under the common law, even under the law of contract. Similarly, here also, there will be a protection unless he has signed off when he entered and said, you can transfer it to anybody in future if you want. Yes.
Thank you, Manish. We have Akash Agarwal.
Akash Agarwal.
Akash.
But this is not restricted to Kerala lawyers, is it?
No, sir. No. This is pan-India, sir.
Names don't
Sushant is from Hyderabad. Manish is from Hyderabad.
Even Jharkhand.
Jharkhand.
No problem. Yes.
Akash.
Where is Akash?
Akash, his question is posted is how can we... Akash, are you there? Can I read out the question?
Read it, no?
How can we identify the level of risk to share our personal data?
How can we identify the level of
risk to share our personal data?
Yes, correct. That's a very good question. He had suggested in the bill that there should be what is known as data scores maintained. How do you maintain data scores? Now, if you are to deposit money with somebody, what do you do first? You say, what is his credit worthiness? What is his credit rating? Rating agencies are there, no? AAA, AAA plus, AAA minus, and C and B and risky and all that. Similarly, with data also, you have just rating agencies. Data scoring is one thing that is done in order to say how good is this fellow's ability to maintain privacy of data. That is the methodology by which can be done. Yes.
So how safe and secure or how credible and reliable that organization or that is? That's
Which one?
Sir, I mean, regarding that rating, what the parameters for the rating would be?
It will have to be evolved. No? I am not able to give you offhand what it is. Now, for example, how far is your money safe if you put it in X company as against Y company? How do you decide it? Now, we are all lawyers with a lot of money. How do you decide it? Tell me. I am a poor man. I don't have money, so the question doesn't arise. Enna Kurian sir.
Sir, Mavanam Vidwanam Bhushanam, sir.
No, Maunam Sammati Suchakam.
That's better.
Kanika Agarwal, can you just put the question?
Is it?
Kanika Agarwal.
Kanika Agarwal.
Good evening, sir. It was a great session, sir.
Thank you,
Sir, actually, I just wanted to know that you have raised an example that we have sent our information to Timbuktu,
yeah.
right? And then a similar mirror copy is saved in our country so that the investigations can be easily done,
Correct.
right? So, sir, a mirror copy is fine. Is staying in our country, right? So, but one copy is lying outside the territory of India. So what is the reliability and credibility that the leakage of the information will not go beyond that country? Are we having any control over there? I mean,
No. Leakage? No. I think Kanika, you misunderstood. The moment a person does business in India, he is subject to the laws of India.
Yeah, right.
This law applies to him. This law requires everybody who collects data to follow the law. So whether he has the mirror copy or not, he is bound by the law in the first place. Mirror copy is an additional requirement from the view of access to immediate access. That is the reason. And another reason. So if he has a mirror copy,
Okay, so what audio?
Again, there's audibility.
Somebody just posted that now audio is so clear. I think yes, and when it is posted, it is gone.
It's virus.
Huh? Sorry?
Sir, you're not audible.
Sorry, you can't hear. The point is, how will you ensure the security of data at the other end? That is the question I take it. Now, if he is maintaining it elsewhere and he is subject to my laws, he has an obligation, and if it breaches from the other end, he is responsible here. He will be visited with all the penalties of the law. That's a simple answer.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Roshan Banerjee.
Hello, my name's Rohan. I'm a law student at the University of Edinburgh, and can I just say that it's been a great honor to listen to everything that's been said here. You know, a lot of people in the UK are interested in, you know, what's going to happen with the Data Protection Act in India because of the whole post-Brexit fallout here regarding how our data privacy regime is going to work. So I was just wondering, you know, given the likelihood of a trade deal between the UK and India, a lot of British companies are going to want to establish a presence in India. For that, they'll obviously need to, you know, collect the data of Indian citizens and whatnot. So under the Data Protection Act, the new bill that's being debated in Parliament, would a statutory authority have the ability to fine data principals not domiciled in India?
Yes. That's why I said there is a limited amount of extraterritorial jurisdiction given under the Act. Now, two things. if you are doing business in India, then your presence is secure. There is no difficulty. You are doing business, you are automatically covered by it. And any company that does business in India, is registered in India or otherwise, then one category is any company who regularly advertises goods and services to Indian citizens is covered by the Act. So even if it doesn't have a business entity, business organization here,
I see.
that's the whole idea.
Got it. Thank you so much, Justice Sri Krishna.
You're welcome, Rohan. I had gone to England, and then in London, they made me address a huge lecture on this, on a comparison between this and the Californian law, which had just then come into force last June, I think.
I see.
There was a big webinar on this.
We'd love to have you in Edinburgh, sir.
I was in Edinburgh last year. But
is it? Okay.
I didn't come for a lecture or I didn't come for professional. I came there to attend some wedding in Edinburgh.
Okay.
Thank you, Rohan.
You're welcome. Yes.
Abhishek Sharma. Abhishek, are you there? So his question is, what are the, it's a descriptive one, what are the differences between India's new bill and European Union's data protection law, the GDPR?
I'll have to give one more lecture.
That we'll have to another day.
You are right, that's a good question.
Yes.
In fact, that is a question on which I'm going to be debating on 23rd with the European GDPR people.
Sir, Kritika Bakshi.
Yes.
Kritika, are you there? I hope I pronounced you right.
Yeah, Kritika is Kritika only. You know?
Kritika Bakshi. Yeah.
Bakshi is also Bakshi only.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
How data localization is connected with data protection?
Who is this? Kritika.
Kritika.
Okay, Kritika, if you are not hearing it, also I'm going to answer this question. Data localization is intended to ensure that data is accessible to the persons who want to access data under a warrant of the appropriate legislation by a legislative method. Now, how is it protected? Protection is another aspect. Protection is the other facet of the whole thing. Without data localization, also you can access, you can protect it. But the data localization ensures that the data is kept here and that it is subjected to all the rigors of the Act, one of which is itself protection. So the moment you are maintaining it here, data security and protection is an obligation that you'll have to comply with under the Act. And therefore, it is, if it is not directly, it is indirectly connected.
Yes, sir. I think, sir, we'll stop with 2 more questions. Anuj Malik, can you put your questions first?
The last question, no?
Okay.
We'll make it, sir. There are 2 more questions waiting, but I think we'll finish. But Anuj, are you putting a question?
Go next. If they're not there, go to the next one.
Okay, Shivani Rathore.
Okay.
So we'll do one thing. Over to you, Prem.
Well, so it was an excellent talk, and the data privacy, it was chiseled to perfection, though somebody has attempted to breach by some anti-socials, as I would say. And so your report on the data privacy and protection, in fact, I had an occasion to read that, and it was a very landmark report, given the multiple touch points and all. And now we are awaiting that to be turning into a monumental law. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. I can assure you that the last signature is mine. That is the contribution.
With regard to your report and with regard to the present bill, now regarding the Data Protection Authority, which is the regulatory body, the report says it should be the composition should be controlled by the government. But in the bill, I think it is in almost.
It's the other way around. One of my grievances is that the DPA has been made totally a government body. We had said that independent practitioners, independent experts, including academicians, should be on the governing body.
Correct.
Now they have gone and said it will all be composed of only government babus.
Correct, sir. Correct, sir.
That is one more criticism I forgot to mention.
Oh,
I mean,
thank
there
you
are
so
many
much.
things with it.
It's finished. Hello, Shyam.
Yes, Deepak, please.
Okay.
2-3 questions I got in WhatsApp. I think it's very specific.
Yes.
So, should a foreign company be permitted to get access to sensitive financial data of Indian citizens at all?
Now the point is, Reserve Bank has already answered the question, saying nothing doing, all data will be here only. No, sorry, you're saying access to it.
Access.
Yeah.
No,
Should
but
the companies be permitted to access to sensitive financial data of Indian citizens at all?
So that's all right. If you want to access, now the foreign company, you want to have a transaction with the foreign company. Let's say I want to get myself treated by the Mayo Clinic in New York. No, I have to give them, no? But that will be done by my consent. Consent is a cure for everything. Isn't it? It's voluntary non-fit injuria.
The latest issue, some cases are come in Supreme Court also. One of the issues that the WhatsApp is expanding their business. Now 10 lakh, I think they are doing. Without compelling, they are going to expand. That question was come and Supreme Court has passed some orders also on that, sir. So whether this is financial data can be, because WhatsApp money, there is a WhatsApp, you can transfer money also through WhatsApp. So that was the question. After the Geo and WhatsApp is joined, that issue was, Supreme Court was just discussed and some issues. I think the question is coming out of that, sir.
But one thing I've learned is, whatever is pending before the Supreme Court, do not make a comment on that.
Yes.
Am I right, Korean sir? Otherwise, Korean sir will issue a contempt.
Sub judice.
Sub judice. Supreme Court will decide it. No, I don't know. I refuse to do anything. Answer a question with regard to something. If you had not told me about Supreme Court, I might have risked an answer.
No, sir. I'm part of that order. So this is my duty to tell you, sir. So we are asking.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Then I step back.
Okay.
Sir, our warm regards to Purnima ma'am also, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes, I
Tell her Kerala misses her. All of us miss her.
Maybe as soon as it is possible and the year becomes more congenial, I'll make a quick trip to Kerala, and I want to visit all those temples right from down south, right up to the north of Kerala.
Sir, that brings us to the end of the 52nd session of the Legal Empowerment Through Interaction lecture series. We are deeply indebted to you, sir, for exposing us to this nuances of data protection and the bill and the new act that is to be brought in. We are also indebted to Justice Kurian Joseph, sir, for the valuable presence, inputs, and Justice V. Ramkumar, sir, and all of you for being present, being part of this journey. Till we meet again tomorrow at 3:30. We have the speaker tomorrow is Senior Advocate of Supreme Court, Srimati Aishwarya Bhatti, on domestic violence laws and overview. Till we meet again 3:30 tomorrow, please take care, stay safe.